Seb, you were just saying, yeah, could you please quote that relationship guru, what you just said?
Yeah, so Matthew Hussey, I think it's spelled Hussey. He's got quite the following, and he's quite the eloquent speaker and very good dude when it comes to relationship matters and especially relationship problematics. And one of the things that he was saying is when you are going on a first date with somebody, they will absolutely tell you all the red flags and you will completely ignore them if you like them, you know? So he was just suggesting, how about this? How about when you go on a first date with somebody and they're disclosing all the red flags, you believe them when they do believe them, because eventually you're gonna be beating yourself up for not believing them and for realizing that everything they told you was actually real. So if somebody has, I think he uses the example of somebody saying, I can be pretty selfish at time, like what a red flag is. That is a massive red flag in the context of a relationship, right?
Yeah, it goes into bias and intuition, right? Like, are you suppressing your intuition because your bias is, um, you know, you are attracted to this person for these reasons in these boxes. However, the spidey sense is going off in these ones. We're like, quiet, quiet, spidey sense. No, no, no.
You can't be trusted.
Yeah, this is really relevant. We're just walking into it like a lot of episodes where there's a lot of gold that happens before the record button gets hit. But today I'm with you. Just heard Seb Lavoie, and we'll get into a little bit more of introductions or reintroductions for those that have been on the show or listening along for a while. And Mark Bouchard, what's up, Mark?
Hey guys, awesome to be here. Thanks so much for having me back on, Eric. And Seb, thanks for joining. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. We were spitballing a lot of ideas. In this one, we were even talking about selection, right? So, elite team selection, ERT, SWAT type of special teams in policing. But also, we talk about promotion, we talk about selection processes and hiring. But then as we kind of bounce some ideas around, we're like, well, what if we just like, there are resources for that. We have talked about that before. What if we look at kind of the broader context of like, how do you set yourself up for all of your opportunities? How do you prime yourself for performance in any team you're in from the time you come in the organization? And like, that's where I love that even when we were discussing, like Seb started talking about relationships and like first impressions. And I mean, maybe like that's a great place to start, right? For people to start thinking about is what is your first impression that you're putting off? How are people receiving you? Like, what information are you presenting? Um, but before we go down that rabbit hole and start bouncing around, I just want to share with the audience. Seb initially came on the show, um, episode 54. That was being a multidimensional leader. And Mark came on episode 59, setting sights on stigma, based on the title of his book, Setting My Sights on Stigma. And then they came together with me, episode 68, which was for a while. And that episode was How to Improve Agency Culture, where we talked about a lot of what this show and project is about, the intersection of leadership, wellness, and culture in organizations. And that was a hard hitter. It was top of the charts for quite a while, and it has been surpassed by a few. So all to say, like, this is probably a perfect time to get our brains back together, and we're gonna smash this one back up to the top. But yeah, dudes, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Honored to be back, brother.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's do the intros for those that are unawares. Seb, you want to kick us off with a little bit about yourself and your backgrounds?
Sure thing. So I'm Seb Lavoie. I spent 20 years in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I spent 16 years in tactical operation, including 12 years on a full-time SWAT team. I was a team leader for 7. And I retired as the divisional sergeant major or provincial sergeant major for the province of British Columbia in Canada. And now I'm retired, and I live on a farm in Alberta.
Dude, you're living that like legit uh call it country life. Or I mean, a lot of folks I know are super into Yellowstone, and I see you're living like the ranch life. You're doing it.
Oh, I am, a million light years away from anything remotely close to Yellowstone in terms of cowboy abilities, but the landscape looks exactly the same.
Hey man, you got the setting. You're doing the work. You're doing that farm work. I mean, way more I don't know, what's the equivalent to street cred when there's no streets? It's like
Farm
pasture.
Land
trade?
cred.
Yeah, land cred. Versus a lot of people that just like to rock the buckle or the boots. So yeah, appreciate you, man. Mark, let's kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So I got about 18 years law enforcement. I did 14 years with Delta Police, which was a suburb or is a suburb of Vancouver. I've done about 10 years in the RCMP's emergency response program, so SWAT team. Spent some time on Seb's unit. And then I did 3 years on the North District team, basically like Northern BC. So most of the province geographically, but not a lot population wise. And then about a year ago, I took a promotion into National Tactical Medicine Program. So there's two of us that run about 150 tactical police medics across the country. And then outside of that, just been doing some stuff around my book and did a master's studying leadership and police mental health, police culture. I'm just trying to help keep pushing our culture in the right direction, hopefully. So thanks for the work you guys are doing, and thanks for letting me join.
Yeah, you're doing it, man. You're doing a lot. And sometimes when we do finally catch up over a call or text, like text threads, you're traveling quite a bit, and you got your job, you got your work, you got your family, and you got your other projects. And so with both of you, my brain is generally very tired after talking to you. So if the listeners feel a little bit of brain melt, it's okay. It's a good thing. That's it's just like working out your body, right? You're gonna have that soreness, and then you're gonna come back better. I'm gonna try to catch up. I am fighting off the end of a sinus infection, so my voice might be a little off, and my brain definitely is not prime. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about priming, and I have you guys to carry me. So let's cut back to first impressions. That first impression rose from The Bachelor. Seb, do you want to keep going on like what you think as far as like that line or that kind of thought and how people can think about this? Because it's not just new cops that listen in and need to pay attention to this, but frequently I talk with active cops, right? People that they got passed up in a selection and they're like, oh man, like how do I come back? I got some feedback. How do I keep moving? What does that stir up in you?
Well, you know, it's an interesting conversation to have, and it's a very complex conversation to have because there's very like a large amount of moving pieces, and so without oversimplifying it, Sean Taylor and I are currently working on a book called The Conscious Ripple Effect, and it speaks to all of those concepts and how interconnected they are. But you have about 15 chapters that are interconnected that are feeding into the perception that others have of you and the perception that you have of yourself in the context of with the aim to optimize who you are as a human being. So I digress on that part. The plug, shameful plug.
No, no shame.
But the fact is, everything from responsibility to authenticity to resilience, empathy, curiosity, discipline, all of the things, and it goes on and on. There's quite the extensive list of things that are going to affect the way that your vibrational output goes. And then there's the spiritual side of that as well, and so when you start talking about the science behind vibrational output and how people perceive you, well, there's a lot of things that are impacting that. First of all, the output of the recipient, and then the output of the person that's actually coming in. And so there is quite a bit that goes into this. Now, ultimately, we know one thing: authenticity. So if a person is lining up their actions with their thoughts and words, generally will do a lot better than somebody that's trying to project a certain image. Maybe something, maybe I know this is what they're after, or maybe I know what they're looking for based on historical hirings, those types of things. And ultimately, we know without a single shred of a doubt that authenticity is one of the most powerful it's one of the most sort of powerful modality that we could use to connect with other human beings. And so now the issue with authenticity is it's only good if your life is in line with what it is that you are portraying or what it is that you are seeking or where it is that you want to go. Failing to do that creates discord, right? Obviously, and it can be perceived. And this is where people get the wrong vibe about what it is that you are, trying to achieve or what you're after. Ultimately,
Yeah.
Those are my first thoughts.
Yeah, you put a lot out there. Mark, how about you?
Yeah. So the one thing I would add is it's the authenticity of who you are. And I think also who you want to be, because who you are changes. Who I was 20 years ago is such a different person from today. But I think our subconscious will perceive inauthenticity if someone's trying to pretend like they're, something that they're not. But I think we can envision, this is what I've helped back to like the whole selection thing with some guys trying to get ready for tryouts. It's like envision who you want to be. And I'll give you an example, but like one of the guys I've helped mentor, he couldn't do a pull up. And a lot of times, like my first thing I say to guys, like, go run a mile and a half, come back and tell me your time. I've yet to meet a person who likes their time. Okay, cool. You got a starting point, man. You want to be an guy? Well, you're at 14 minutes. You probably need to get to 10. Like, let's start working on it. And no shame. Like, cool, man. We all got a starting point. When I first ran my first attempt, I barely passed. And I improved my time quite a lot after that. So I think that recognition of who you are and just being authentic in who you are, but then also living for that future, like creating that future in your mind of where you're going, and then also living that authentically, and then practicing those daily habits. I think the three of us all see the power of habits in our lives. Like you are what your habits make you. You either choose to get up and do something active, something, physical, eat healthy, prioritize your sleep, all those kind of things, or you don't. And over time, it really shows. And often when I talk to friends who are struggling and I just say, where's your drinking at? Oh yeah, no, I'm drinking again. And it's like, yeah, that's part of what's happening, man. You're falling away from who you want to be and what's good for you. And cool. Well, let's start getting you back on track.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk about habits and routines, and this is definitely a shameless plug because no shame, it's my show. So I can promote my course, my video course, Get Gritty. It's on the website, on the shop. But it's all about that because I've gotten so many questions through the career, and also like doing Blue Grit. Like people are like, hey, like, how do you design your life? How do I build this? And it might be wellness focused, or how do I build this? And it might be career balance, right? This illusion of balance, right? And it's just to say that we have a lot of stressors and you got to start with something and build a structure. And that goes right into what you guys are both talking about, which is like this authenticity. Like, how do we show up as ourselves, like our true selves, and also where we want to go? And what I wrote down was like purpose and mission. And we know what an agency mission is, right? We know what our goal on the street is when we put on the uniform, we go out and we drive around, or we really should if we don't, and what that looks like. But what is our personal mission? And this is you just gave a shout out to Sean, and we'll add Shanston for the collective, but also like Dr. Gino. We were talking about Dr. Gino Kalura, who's been on the show too, about like this personal constitution. And it wasn't until he brought it up a couple times that I was like, dang, I really need to do this. And to actually write down like my mission statement, like in life, not in my police job. It's a huge career, it's identity, it's all these things, but it is not all of me. But how do I know if I'm actually living in trying to go in the direction unless I know what that direction is? Like it's like not having a map and not having a compass. And so writing that down's been so helpful in like I'll say like I went through a lot of different types of stressors in the last year that I hadn't commonly gone through. And I mean, that is part of life, right? Like I love how Mark, you said it, like we're not the same person. You should not be the same person. We should be growing, and so you're different. And it reminds me of that quote. Is it Heraclitus or Heraclitus? I don't know how to pronounce it. But a man never steps in the same river twice because it's a different river and it's a different man every single time. And so I love all that. I love how you guys really kicked it off in all these respects. But I have referenced my mission and my values. Like I've written them down, I edit them, I continue to review them periodically. And I had a buddy going through a lot of kind of this, I don't want to call it a midlife crisis, but kind of a change in direction and unknowing of what's next. I told him numerous times, talking to him and sitting down with him, like, have you written this stuff down yet? And finally he's like, I'm working on it, and I can see it already kind of taking shape.
Yeah, that's a really good, excellent points that were made, and there's so many directions we can take this conversation. There's so much stuff there, but being purpose driven is the anchor of all these other sacrifice and discipline and all of the things that work together, with motivation, and because that's a part of the equation as well. But this is for another conversation. But the fact is, without the purpose, without the aim, you're not hitting anything you're not aiming at. We know that, and so. And then the purpose, generally speaking, is not well understood, in that it needs to be so well understood by yourself as an individual, so cemented in your own mind that when adversity hits, you don't start second guessing, your endpoint on account of not being certain enough of what it is that you are here to do, or what it is that you want to do it and how you're going to go about doing it. Now, the trap is this: your mission statement or the end goal may be a certain thing. The mission execution is the way that you will employ to reach that goal. And a lot of people get completely locked in on how they're going to accomplish the mission that they set forth for themselves. And this is a big mistake. In the tactical world, this would never happen. That is why you have contingencies. That is why you're flexible. That is why you have adaptability. All those things are incredibly important. You need to be able to realize that mission execution may not be what you originally thought. And you have to realize that you have the power to make a decision on how you are going to reallocate your energy to reach that end goal that you have set forth for yourself. So I think those are two separate things. Having a clear purpose and understanding your why and how you're going to go about doing it, having the flexibility of changing that if need be. I think that's where we lose a lot of, that's where people get discouraged if they can't reach a certain end goal and all of a sudden they set a new goal or a new purpose. I mean, philosophically speaking, how many purposes do you have? There's a limited amount of that are truly anchored in reality.
Yeah, and when you say that, that's what you're nodding at. That's what kind of stirred up in me was like a position, right? Maybe it's going like, hey, I want to be a sergeant. Maybe it's because I want to join the ERT team, right? I want to join the tactical team. And after a couple rounds, it's not there, right? Maybe you did throw everything you could at it. Maybe you had an injury. Maybe whatever. And then am I hearing kind of you saying like, well, it's okay to pivot or just to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean you're stuck. And sometimes, I mean, we talk about spirituality and philosophical stuff here, but sometimes maybe that is like kind of part of the journey, and you're gonna land where you need to land if you're true to your purpose, right? Because your life mission purpose should not have been to get on the team. It should have been broader, where you can maybe apply that to that. Am I kind of tracking the same direction?
Yeah, it is. I mean, what it ultimately comes down to is spheres of control, which, newsflash, we have none. What we have is influence over outcomes. That is all we have. And there's a spectrum of influence that we have. Some things we have a decent amount of influence over, other things we have almost no influence over, and other things we have none at all. And so at the end of the day, when I look at something in any endeavor, whether I'm successful or not, what have I done to optimize my success, my chances of success personally? What have I done to optimize my chances of success? And I take all the external factors out of that. I really do. It's like external factors are going to happen. You're going to apply on a promotion and you're going to have all the tools in the world, but that one person does not like your face. What can you do about this, right? No, I mean, it's a reality, right? And so yes, you can fall into a very, very dangerous pit, which is called victimhood, and start riding the victimhood train. And now you start projecting it everywhere you go, and so now you're bringing it with you. Or you look at it and you go, when things are meant to be, they're meant to be. I hate to be that, use a statement that's so overused, but the reality is real. Like there is an underpinning to this life, which is more spiritual than anything else. And ultimately that needs to line up, because if it doesn't, if you're not supposed to be somewhere, you will not be there, no matter how hard you try. And so it's important. And this brings, another angle to this, which is, well, when do you know when you're not meant to do something and when you should be pursuing more, right? I think it becomes really, really clear if you stick to a process, or if you stick to a journey or a goal, an outcome that you're seeking, and you're driving with everything you have. At some point, the cost will outweigh the benefits, and when that happens, and you are now at a critical point, you're going to have to make a decision, or the decision will be made for you on account of injuries or any other external factors that may come into play. But for me, looking at myself in the mirror, have I done everything I absolutely could? If the answer is yes, I'm satisfied with that. It does not count as a failure,
Yeah, man, I just want to cut in real quick and then get to Mark, but that victimhood train, right? That is a train where there are too many cars on it and there's too many empty seats. They will take anyone who wants to go, and they'll slow down to let anyone on, and then they move fast, right? Like it's hard to you see people on it, or we feel ourselves on it at times. It's hard to get off that train. They don't want to let people off, and the people on it don't seem to want to get let off. And maybe this is a dangerous prompt to follow on, but how do you toggle that, right? Because sometimes I'm like, man, maybe it's not meant to be. I want to be clear and at peace, recognizing my locus of control, right? A little bit of stoicism, but that can be so pervasive with this like victimhood. Is it teasing like this, hey, like it's not for you, versus you're like, no, like I'm going to fight. I'm going to keep going, because I think we can all think of that an example in our own lives or our friends where you're like, man, it's not going to happen. I don't want to sound like you should give up or something like that, but there is such a thing as like ego or stubbornness or not reading the room or the climate. It's not right.
Yeah, I think our mind can kind of go to the negative sometimes and make excuses. Like we like to be the hero in our own story. And when some of those things that are outside of our control, Seb, with yours, like whether they don't like your face or whatever, it can be like, well, it's not my fault. And rather than reflect on like, what we need to do is take a lesson out of it. Thing didn't go our way, and not necessarily even feel bad. Like I look at some guys where they gave everything they had to get into the ERT program. And honestly, sadly, they didn't make it through. And I love them, and I'm so impressed. I know guys who got through selection multiple times of phase one, like Hell Week. Like there's guys in the program that might not even be able to do that right now. And man, I mad respect for people who did that. But still, at the end of the day, they weren't successful. And what can you do at that point? Again, you can be the victim. It can be, oh, they just didn't like me for whatever reason. And it can be blaming, or it can be, okay, what can I learn about this? What can I learn about myself? You always like, what do you have as choices? To sit and feel bad for yourself, but that's not going to help you, or to choose to grow out of the hardship. And I think that's really the strength. That's the wisdom. And often it's when we go through those hardships, we learn those lessons, and really that's all we can do is just pull together and learn something and try and move forward and get better from there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I tend to think of life's events as inherently neutral. We assign the positive and the negative, in relation to what happens. And I truly believe that having the ability, and so let me be a little cautious here. So, seeking happiness is one thing, but seeking happiness is a fleeting pursuit. It's almost guaranteed that at some point you're going to experience a mission failure, because you cannot constantly be happy. And if you lose a kid, or if you face severe adversity, you are not going to be happy. And now is that a mission failure? So for me, it's always about seeking meaning. If I seek meaning, I can find meaning in absolutely everything. I can find meaning even in losing a kid, or losing a limb, or losing, my friends, or my job, or whatever the case may be. And so attaching a certain amount of meaning to an anchored purpose that you've established, that then you will find meaning in absolutely everything that happens. That includes the bad and the good. But it's more important when it's the bad, because if you are capable of taking meaningful lessons from the bad, man, the world's your oyster, because it won't keep coming. And so being in victimhood is a complete opposite of that, and having that projection where everywhere you go, you are now the victim of your own story. Now it's that proliferation of that's going to happen. And all you're going to do is consistently replicate the behavior that replicate the victimhood. And it becomes a very, very big problem. And so, for me, when I look at it, as I said earlier, have I given everything I could? If the answer is no, I'm not proud of that. I'm not happy with that, but I also don't engage life that way. So if you're going to engage in something, say like the ERT program or any other program you want to be a part of, that's difficult and meaningful, then you're going to have to do everything that you can to optimize your chance of being successful. And so before I quit at anything, I'm going to make sure that I introspect on whether or not what I have done was enough in terms of what could have been done. And I think that sometimes we get lost a little bit in our own efforts and the way that we value our efforts, or the way that we rate how efficient our efforts were. And sometimes we kind of take the carpet from under our own feet. by not necessarily reaching out to subject matter experts or people that can really help us, or we overestimate our ability to program our workouts, or we, there's a lot of humility that needs to be applied against that filter in order to be able to make a proper assessment whether or not I've done everything I could to be where I needed to be. And then the rest of it is external factors, which I have no control over, and I can't do anything about that,
Yeah, it's almost like I think the difference is, the victimhood, right? The people waiting, like, oh, it's not up to me, right? There's those folks that, whether they are waiting on a boss or they're waiting on a legitimate like higher power in the universe, or like, well, I'm just here, I'm at your will, right? The difference is like releasing the control of outcomes versus releasing any personal ownership on your action that you're going to take, right? So you can keep, for me, I think that it's recognizing if you keep applying yourself and applying your action, that's good, right? You can find your path or the pivot away, around the obstacle. The difference is like that release of all personal responsibility, or just that Zen you're kind of speaking of earlier, where it's like, no, I'm releasing the illusion that I can control the outcome, and I'm at peace with that. And to me, that is like the gold standard. It's kind of like the old man status of like, I don't give an F about what anyone thinks because I'm me. And it goes right back to that earlier piece of like authenticity, because you're like, I'm me and I'm going to do my thing, and I can't control how other people think. It doesn't mean being an a-hole. It just means like, hey, I'm true to myself. And with that comes this like superpower of like personal agency and freedom, right? Like to really have that, I mean, I think that's what I am so many ways striving for. I'm a long ways from it, trying to get to that point. And Mark, sorry I cut you off. It looked like you're about to say something on that.
Oh, that's all good, buddy. I was just going to elaborate slightly on something Seb was saying. I think you're sharing a lot of wisdom there about finding meaning, Seb. And the one thing is, I was like wrapping my own head around that. Like, for anyone who hasn't read my book or hasn't heard my story before, I was off work, stress leave, failed a psych exam, trying to get back. And I really had a hard time. And then the way I thought of it was actually making meaning. Like, because it's almost like finding, to me, like I actually kind of drew that distinction. It's a very, very small distinction, but it's instead of like I just randomly found it, it was like I choose to make meaning out of the hardship. I look at it and I try and find lessons. And to bring us back a little bit of like the mission and the purpose and the changes, I look at myself 20 years ago. What did I want? I just wanted to be a hockey player. I didn't care about anything else. But where did that come from? Honestly, it came from ego. It was about me.
Yes.
I want status. I want the fun. I want, to play in front of fans and all those kind of things. And then as I maybe matured, gained some wisdom, it became about others. And like what my mission became was, how do I keep improving myself so that I can help and serve others? And like, to me, it took hours and hours of self-reflection, of writing, of thinking about it to try and realize like, what's a common theme of what I do? Every day I try and work on my fitness. I try and read a book. I try and like phone someone, contact those around me, those I love. And like, for me, it shows up the most with my family. Like the mentorship, those I want to help the most are my kids, right? There's who need the most help from me. But then how do I help others outside of that? How do I help, buddies on the team or people within the program? So that's a little bit of like my own evolution. And what will that look like for me in 20 years? I don't know, but it may continue to evolve. But I think when we find common themes that it brings me such a sense of meaning in my life to now help others, because we're all going to struggle. Like Seb, you had said, what about if you lose a child, or like even some of what you've been through, like just, we're all going to go through struggle, right? We're all going to lose a parent. We're all going to lose a loved one. No one gets out of this alive. So there's hardship coming, and you have to choose to make that meaning out of those hardships and just choose to grow stronger and find ways to help others and connect with others to get through it together.
Yeah, and when you look at the powerful reframes that you're talking about here, Mark, those are going to be critical in the sense that, just imagine with your analogy, you're talking about hockey earlier. So imagine a hockey team. You wouldn't dream of a hockey team showing up for a game and winning without practicing, without training, without doing strength and conditioning, without preparing for the adversity coming up, which is the game. But somehow we think that when it comes to adversity, we're going to rise up to the occasion without practicing. Like, you have all these opportunities to micro practice. whether it's self-imposed adversity through hardship and things that you're taking on that are difficult, that you prove to yourself that you have the capacity to do it and to persevere and pursue something that's meaningful to you and do so when it's difficult, right? Is going to be a draw, and it's going to be, you'll be able to draw upon that once adversity does hit, for you to say, I've been through, X, Y, and Z, whether self-imposed or otherwise. But the fact of thinking that you're going to always rise to the occasion when big adversity hits, if your goal in life is to be comfortable and not engage in adversity, or not engage in reframing when you have lower, more manageable adversity, I got some bad news. Like, you need to use that. You need to use that tool. You need to be able to be able to use those positive reframes. And I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about positive reframe on how can I go forward in spite of what's going on here. Another thing that you talked about that I think is worth maybe extrapolating on just ever so slightly is the linear concept of time that we have as human beings. Like, we are convinced, because that's all we know. We think, the sun goes around, the stars do X, Y, and Z, and as a result of that, yesterday was yesterday, today is today, and tomorrow is tomorrow, and there's a predictable pattern there. That is a massive oversimplification. I don't know if you were familiar with Bergson, one of the, and I can't even remember if it was a writer or a philosopher. Anyway, Bergson essentially said something along the lines of, time as we know it linearly is a useful oversimplification, which couldn't be more accurate, really. Because think of it this way. A lot of the times, a lot of people are struggling with concept of identity as to who they once were, and the amount of value that they assign to who they once were have a massive amount of work to do when it comes to no longer being who they once were, on account of the job they were in is no longer what they do, or they're gone from an elite unit, or they are, and so now they see this as the sort of the pinnacle of what their life was going to be about. And now they're kind of nothing. Like, they've lost that sense of identity, which is a massive, massive mistake to make, because ultimately that person that you were is the reason for who you are today. So that person is very well within you and alive, and you can take all of the lessons learned, all of the experience, all of the subject matter expertise that you've attained or reached over the course of the time that you were doing something very special, and transpose that anywhere else you want to go. And so the actions that you're taking today are now going to reflect on the future. So really, when you look at it, those three times or the what we perceive as linear timelines, so to speak, are interconnected in a way that doesn't necessarily make them back and forth linearly. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but it's basically, who you are today is a direct result of who you were yesterday, and who you'll be tomorrow is a direct result of the actions that you are taking today. So those three are very much interconnected. It's not simple, and so it's never gone away. You're still the same person. You're better. You're growing. You're doing those things. So that's where the reframe comes in yet again.
Yeah, there's a lot there for sure. And it makes me think of, not to go down like the inner child path, but like, we are a result of our past, right? And it's not like there's so many things to focus on for the growth piece, right? Which is that the proper reframes. And I like how you point out this toxic positivity. Like, not everything is sunshine and rainbows like that. Putting a lipstick on a pig doesn't like help the situation get better, but to recognize it for what it is. And you both have shared very much, and I very open to you guys talking, kind of like the takeaways, or kind of, if you could distill down like what really helped you guys through your hardest times. And I do talk about that in Get Gritty as well. As like, I found myself in times like very resilient, and I can credit specific habits, routines, health practices, groundedness. And I also found myself on paper at a time when like life should have been grand, but I didn't have all those things together, and how dejected I felt, how pervasive the victimhood mentality was. And I'm not proud of it, but I've learned so much from it, which is to say that like, even in the adversity as of late, when I find myself like, I don't have all the answers, I have a lot more of the framework, I have a lot more of the tools and the recognition to check the ego and embrace the tools and the relationships and the mentorship. Like, the literally the oldest I've ever been. That's kind of what now is, right? have the most experience I've ever had, and I'll continue to have the most. And I find myself going to books, philosophy, podcasts, gentlemen like you, more and more and more to find a better route to the answers and to find my way back to this path of resilience. And I'm better for it, right? It doesn't make it easy, but it's just recognizing that.
Yeah. Well, we can tie this back a little bit into identity. Like Seb, I know you had talked a bit about that, and Eric, I think kind of what I'm hearing you describe is like over time our identity changes a bit, and then how we perceive that, how we act it. Right? It's that your daily actions are your identity. That's a piece of who you are. I'm someone that works out every day. I'm someone that prioritizes my sleep. I'm someone that doesn't get blackout drunk all the time anymore. Right? I mean, and I've been on the other side of that one too. So I think it helps us to focus on the process of what we're going through instead of just staying fixated on the outcome. And that also ties back in a little bit with goals. Because I think sometimes we have this like, if I can just achieve this goal, then I'll be happy. If I can just get that promotion, if I can just get on that team, and I'll tell you what, I'll tell you right now, you can have whatever goal you imagine. And guess what? Once you get there, you're going to be like, really? That's it? Like, what's next?
Sometimes it's depression, right? Like we see that in Olympic athletes. If you want to talk about the pinnacle of someone working their whole life for an event or a day, and that is a common thing, right? They get the gold, and then what? There's nothing. There's nothing else charted, right?
Oh man, there's so much there, but I mean, this is an extremely valid point. When you start looking at end goals and you we're fueled by anticipatory rewards. Our entire dopamine system works on anticipatory reward. Basically, you're not trying to get dopamine. Dopamine actually pushes you to go out and seek these experiences, and it's a really interesting concept. So there's a few things that were said that were very important here. One of the ways to reframe anything that you are doing that has meaning for you, or something that you're setting your mind to do, and for you to be successful in that pursuit, is to set your anticipatory reward need on actionable steps that are closer to you, right? I'll give you an example of this. Mark was mentioning, his master's degree. Well, I finished one in January as well, and it sounded really sexy 3 years ago when I wanted a master's, and I thought of it being on my wall, and I was like, yeah, that's going to be awesome. But as soon as the second paper came in, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a long 2 years, kind of deal. And so it's really easy to lose motivation, to lose, and even your discipline can get affected by you putting too much hope in the end product rather than the steps that you take to get there. And so for me, it became about, okay, this is the end goal, having the master's on the wall, 2 years from now, all the good stuff. But what I really want to do and where I want to reward myself is for sitting down 20 minutes a day reading, for writing half of my paper or a paragraph or a chapter or whatever it is this week, And so I would set these little manageable goals, and now you're taking them on and you're actually rewarding yourself. And when you're rewarding yourself, your motivation, which is, just oxytocin and adrenaline, basically, it happens. And so to separate the two, which is something that's common now, where people say, well, motivation is nothing. Self-discipline is everything. It's like we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like there is some physiology in here that doesn't exactly work that way. And they're really symbiotic, or should be, and they should be working hand in hand. And so how do you do that? Well, your anchor is your discipline. And then from time to time, you get an inject of motivation as you are disciplined enough to do the small steps that you have set forth for yourself. And so it becomes about taking something that's really wide and long and broad and make it manageable, and handling it with manageable steps. And so the more you're able to assign value to the little things, the more it becomes autonomous. It's now who you are. When you talk to Mark right now, for him to go work out today is not an event. Like he doesn't have to convince himself to do it, because now it's become an autonomous process, which is a part of his pattern. Right. And so now once you start dealing with this, the thought that you're going to have to convince yourself to go train all the time is erroneous. It isn't the case. You're not going to. It's going to get way easier. The workouts are going to get harder. Don't get me wrong, but because you're going to get fitter, but it's going to get easier to just go as a matter of course. And so finally and lastly, the one thing I'd like to address as well is what Mark was talking about and what you were talking about, Eric, in the concept of identity. And so I identify myself as somebody that say workouts every day. For me, it's always been about multi-layered when it comes to the things that make who you are. So the fact that you work out every day is a part of who you are. It's a very small part of who you are, and it's a very valuable part, and all of the things. I'm not taking any of the, sort of the benefits of it or anything like that away. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that I am multi-layered. There's a million things that formulate who you are as a person. Because guess what? If you love training and that is all you live for, what happens when you lose a limb? What happens when you get when you hurt your back? What happens when, it doesn't have to be a super extreme example. And so now you find yourself in a position where the everything that defines you are unable to do, and therefore what's left is a dark pit, of negative emotions and negative thoughts and all of the things. Whereas, for example, I lost a leg, and stuff happens and it got weird, and I did lose a leg. But when it happens, immediately it was like, what else have I been putting off? Well, the masters, what for my entire career, I wanted a sort of an academic background that matched my operational background, but I never did it because I didn't have time to do it. It wasn't feasible. And so what I do, I invested in learning another language. I invested in learning in engaging in the master's program and and it doesn't need to be academia. It could be anything. But the fact is, all of the things that you are neglecting on account of obsessing with one thing is going to bring an incredible amount of meaning and growth. One final thing about this is there are certain things that we are pathologically attached to. It's as humans. And those things, they're not necessarily healthy for you. If you are pathologically attached to eating a 27-ounce steak every time you sit down, you need to fast. You need to fast. And I mean this, respectfully, and you need to do it safely and all of the things. But the reality is you need to disconnect from the things that you are pathologically attached to so that they become a lot more manageable in as opposed to controlling. And so there's a lot of avenues we can go into, but those are all sort of thoughts percolating as a result of what you guys are talking about.
Hey, Eric, you okay if I jump in here?
Yeah,
let me just start.
We're both like, you go.
Let me just start out by saying, congrats, Seb. That's really cool. You did that. You should be really proud of that. That's a big accomplishment. The other thing I want to add is the micro goals. Like, I think you referenced it a little bit there, but it's so applicable in so many ways. Like back to an ERT selection. It's just you run to the next post. It's you're not worrying about the next hour, the next day. That's when you quit. You're worried about the next push-up, right? Just get to 10. That's all you got to do. And that there's so much power there. And I will say, obviously, you've talked about writing your book. Congrats on doing that. That's again another massive project. One thing I learned in writing my book was the power of micro goals. Writing a book took me 4 years. Like, that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's such a big thing. It's so overwhelming. And you can go back and just rewrite the same thing you rewrote over and over again. And you're just spinning your tires doing nothing. And what I found was the more I could set little micro goals, just write this one page, write this one topic. And honestly, back to the habits, like you talked about reading a book for 20 minutes. When I open a book, my goal is to read one page, read for 1 minute, and I'll read for an hour or 20 minutes or whatever. But it's just setting those really small, it's so the inertia, the initial start of doing that is so much more doable. And then you'll accomplish all kinds of stuff. If you set a goal of write, 250 words, you end up writing 2,000 words or 5,000 words, and you got done way more than you expected. So that, to me, learning that was so powerful. And the other thing is time horizons. Understanding that, do that for 1 day. Okay, you got 500 words written, or you got one workout in or whatever. But do that for a year, do that for 10 years. Like, wow, your life just starts to get so much better. And for the example of those kind of things, I really see it like an asymmetrical use of time. You can invest, like you take all this wisdom, you've spent 40 some odd years, you learn all this stuff, and now you spend 1,000 hours or thousands of hours to put it into something. And Eric, it's like what you've done with your course. Like, for anybody who's listening to these episodes, if you've listened to 100+ episodes of Eric like I have, like, you're literally paying like $1 per episode for him to just take all that same wisdom and make it really actionable. Rather than you got to go through all these different things and you got to take all your time, he's simplifying it for your time to make it really easy for you to do that. And that's that asymmetrical use of time. So Eric spent how many hours putting his course together? And then now
Don't
it can
even
go
know.
replicate over and over again. I guarantee you there will be someone doing your course while you're sleeping. And there's so much power in that, where you can invest a whole lot of resources in something and then it can just replicate over and over again and help more and more people. Like, that's a super powerful, super cool thing to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And that's really the point of that. And that's the point of this. Like, this project is like, we could shoot the breeze and we could all feel better for it and sharpen our brains, but we get to share that out, right? And so literally starting with a prompt of how do you kind of bring in a better, I guess, better environment to grow and optimize your professional performance. And then we're talking about, like, we're really going down the rabbit hole of resilience and mindset and shifting your narratives to make sure that you are primed for purpose and mindset. But I do want to cut back to a couple things. And one thing, when Seb, you're talking about looking at your identity in the physical capacity, because that's something that's been kind of in the back of my brain as you shared about this, and you're saying supposedly, right? Like, let's suppose you lose a limb, which you've actually done. And for those that are unaware, like look up Seb, and he's a physical specimen, right? Martial artist, tactician, like tactical athlete. You know, that phrase gets thrown around a lot, but if you just look at the presence and what he can speak to and what he could do, you're like, okay, that's a guy I don't want to mess with. And I think it's important to say that, because for myself, and I think a lot of people that are in the similar veins or kind of thought processes, it's like our physical ability is so crucial to our identity, right? It's so crucial to our confidence, right? Like, I, grew up a pretty scrawny kid, not athletic, but coming into the police service, like recognizing the necessity not just to be quote unquote fit and able to run and do some push-ups and stuff. I was like, no, I need to be a dominant force when it requires it. And so, like, I think from a perspective, there were years where I would have labeled myself, and I say I would have, not anymore because I adapted my vision on this, but I was the best shape of my life. But if I was laid out, if I popped something into my back, like doing deadlifts, I would be so dejected, right? And we talk about the pathological connection to things. Like, pathologically, even if I slept 4.5 hours a night or a morning, I guess, because I was on Graves at the time, I would still get up and caffeinate until I could get to the gym for an hour plus to lift heavy, right? And this is like, you guys are both smirking and like, because that's not the answer, but it was my necessity, my stubbornness, my ego that was stuck in that pattern where, like, I didn't feel right. But also, when things weren't going great in the gym, things weren't going great in me. And that is, I feel very comfortable and proud that I've grown past that. And that's the thing I would nudge, the younger, usually men, but the younger folks, generally younger, that are in that vein of like, hey, like, think about what your purpose is, right? Because my purpose was not to max out at the gym every day. My purpose was to be a dominant force if it should require it, to protect the public and my buddies and myself. But I'm curious, like, if you could share what that process was like, Seb, because for someone that is so, I mean, you've always been one, as far as I've known you and seen, like, to sharpen your body, to sharpen your brain. So it's not just one, it's not all brawn, but I'm curious what that process was like, rather than shifting to be, okay, now it's the time to get my master's. Um, what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question and thanks for the comments earlier. Definitely an old guy now, so. But anyways, one of the things that I just want to go back to before I answer this quickly is because I think it has incredible value for your folks. When Mark was talking about overcoming resistance, I essentially wrote overcoming resistance through self-created momentum. And so this is what he was talking about. And what I like about this is, and what people need to understand, is that disabling is the norm. We are negatively wired individuals. And if something feels uncomfortable, therefore it ought to be deadly. And so it's built right into our survival mechanisms. And so sometimes, in order for you to accomplish something that you perceive or that your body perceives as extremely threatening or dangerous or uncomfortable, you might have to flank your brain. you might have to flank it. And one of the good ways to do that is to go, hey, I'm just going to read for 5 minutes, is wink, wink, But as soon as the brain and the body realizes that there's no lethal threat here, it's going to start scanning for additional threats. And now you're into reading. You just love it. And this goes for anything that you dive into with exploration. Say, for example, you have a paper to write, or you have tax system, whatever the case may be. We all know that by the time you are done with whatever process, you're going to say, this was not as hard as I anticipated it to be. Mm-hmm. This is your disabling mechanisms kicking in, trying to stop you from doing something that's uncomfortable. And the best way to stop the anxiety that percolates as a result of that is to engage in it yesterday. Get on it immediately, even if it's for 2 minutes. Yeah. I used to do this with one of my clients. His thing was, he was very intimidated by the gym, and he had some reasons for that, and they were valid and all of it. But eventually I said to him, look, all I want you to do, you don't even need to work out. All I want you to do is go on the treadmill and spend 5 minutes on the treadmill until you're sweaty. That's all I'm asking. And then if you decide that you don't want to do anything else, just go, right? Of course, by the time he was done with his 5 minutes on the treadmill, he was already at the gym. He was already sweaty. He already needed a shower. So now there were no excuses, and he just engaged in whatever it is that he wanted, that he knew he needed to do to be the person he wanted to be. And so there's various ways to do that, but it's important to understand that, yes, you absolutely will disable everything difficult or uncomfortable if you let it, right? So you have to have these circumventing mechanisms, so to speak. Now, as far as my reaction to, I'm assuming you're talking about the limb loss itself, or you're talking about, So first of all, I, despite the fact that I was very into the physical realm, I was into a lot of things, and that was all the other realms as well. And so for me, I wasn't a sort of, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I wasn't a one-trick pony, right? It wasn't like, oh, Seb is all of this or all of that. There were a variety of things. I didn't do any of it like really particularly well, but I'm just saying I had various interests and various. No, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's not like I was anything special in anything, but I was really making sure that there was variety there, that I could tap into a bunch of different things that I love doing and engaging in, intellectually, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of the things, all of the realms, because those realms are all interconnected. We're like a giant pulley system. You pull on something, even if it seems to be completely unrelated, it actually pulls on something that, doesn't seem like they should be associated. Yeah. And I think that the big trap that we do as human beings is we silo things, because it helps us make sense of a very complex and interconnected world. And when we can't make sense of things, we get antsy. So anyways, I digress, and I will finally answer your question. For me, there was an original period of time, which is an allowable 24, 48 hours, where I felt sorry about myself, and this sucks, and I'm never going to be the same man again. And then this is me acknowledging the emotions that are flowing through me, not disregarding the emotions that are flowing through me, but also not giving them the power in a steering wheel, right? And so for 24, 48 hours, I allowed myself to be disappointed that I was no longer going to be physically the man that I was. And then after that 48 hours, I said, now what? What's the way forward here? What am I doing? What am I building? How am I tying a white belt in a variety of different things so that I can actually gain from this experience, much more than just from the experience itself, but also from the work that I've done post-experience. And this is where my brain reframed immediately. And really 3 days after this limb loss, even though I hadn't lost my limb yet, because, this would come over 2 years later, but we knew where it was going, really. It became about all of the little things that I could do to make my life better, to optimize myself, to optimize my experience, to enrich my life experience, and not dwell excessively over what happened that I couldn't change anything about. And so sometimes when people ask me, that must have been the most difficult thing ever, it actually wasn't. It was difficult, yes, temporarily, but what would have been even more difficult is if I decided not to reset on a different course or change the bearing, and I stayed behind being the guy for the first 24 or 48 hours and just kept on stewing on that and realizing that I somehow messed up my life so catastrophically that I would never be the same again, which is completely inaccurate. And so it's really a willful decision, but it requires introspection, and it requires honest introspection. And we've mentioned, pride and ego. Pride and ego is probably one of the, it's first of all, it's a human sinning ways, but also it's incredibly, what's the word? Insidious. Pride is extremely insidious because a lot of times you won't necessarily associate it to your ego if you're having an adverse reaction to certain thing. And so really being aware when you're being prideful or when your ego is hurting, and it can be in all kinds of situations so that you can control that. It really helps on the emotional regulation piece, right?
Yeah. There's a few pieces I want to highlight in on. One is that you gave yourself permission to mourn, right? Like you're like, hey, this sucks. I think that's really healthy. I think that's really helpful rather than suppressing. Like, we should be feeling, we're emotional creatures. Feel the thing you want to feel. And now let's move to action, right? And so I think you also answered a lot of the question in the preface of your question, which is to say, like, you had other things going on. You had other interests, passions, pursuits. And that's where I'd really want people to hear that, because we do talk about the oftentimes over identity with the job, with the badge, with the uniform on this show, but also like with just interests and passions, right? I have full confidence that if I get a debilitating diagnosis at this time in my life, I will handle it much better than I did in my 20s, even though I didn't have a family and a kid, right? Because I identified so much with what I could do physically, right? I think now what's really scary and for a lot of us is that to recognize that something could happen with your brain, like, so I would choose brain over body now. I don't know if in my 20s I'd said it the same way. And so that is the evolution there. Yeah, Mark, I do have a question for you, kind of going back to the discussion of the book. And because
Can I
yeah,
pause you for one, Seb?
please,
'Cause
yeah.
I'd like to jump on what Seb said, and then I'd love to come back to you if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Let's do it.
So, Seb, you were being a bit humble there, but for anyone listening, I have tried some jujitsu with Seb, and I jokingly think of it as like wrestling with a bear, where I just wonder, like, how many seconds am I able to stay alive before this bear kills me? It actually is my point of reference when I think of lethal force psychology, because we talk about things like, well, shooting an unarmed person. There are people unarmed that could kill me as an armed police officer. You have to understand your limitations and know that there are people out there with those kind of capabilities, and you don't know it until you actually get on a floor with them or they grab you and you see the level of strength and capability that they have. So I didn't want to interrupt you while you were going, Seb, but I thought I would just share that. The other thing you mentioned was about finding that different bearing. And I think sometimes we choose, I just want a new bearing. And sometimes we hit a point where that path we were on, we can't keep going on it. And we weren't able to choose it. And that can be really hard. And for me, I didn't sign up for my master's because, I so badly wanted to do a master's, like kind of what you were describing. I was having to leave ERT because I was timing out. And now I'm like, I had watched buddies go through depression. You have this awesome thing with your best friends, you go do cool stuff every day, and now you're just gone and it all goes on without you. And I'm like, I don't want that depression. And I needed a new goal to refocus. And I knew it had to be very different from the old goal because nothing will replace that. Nothing will fill that void. And I just needed that new direction. And that it helped me to fill it in that time frame. So I just want to share that because some people listening to this, you're going to run into that in your life, whatever that looks like in different ways. And sometimes you're going to have to go, oh man, I've hit this roadblock on that path or that road. And now I have to choose a new bearing and I have to find whatever's new meaning for me. So Eric, I'll turn it back over to you if you want. Sorry to interrupt you, buddy.
No, not at all. And I do think that it's worth highlighting the extreme humility of Seb to be like, yeah, I'm okay at a couple things. But yeah, what I was gonna say is like kind of the example specifically about your book, right? It took years and years to write it. And that's like actively writing, but you could look at like maybe a decade, maybe more, maybe the entirety of your life to build up to the insight and the skill and the knowledge to write that book, right? And so sometimes that is the thing that we need to give ourselves credit for when we're doing the work or the project or the service we're doing is not just in that raw time. It's like so much an accumulation of that. But really what I wanted to kind of get at was that whether people are thinking about writing a book or starting a podcast or what have you, or getting back in the gym, like it is the little cumulative things, right? Or if it is to like kind of reconnect with your loved ones, right? If it is to navigate in your post-traumatic growth journey, it feels so daunting at one time, right? And to say like, yeah, I'm going to write a book. I mean, that's like debilitating right now. And I'll speak this into existence. I'm working on a book, and it is daunting. It's absolutely daunting. And sometimes I have the very intention that you say, with write a page, but I can recognize that sometimes I'm like, there's nothing good flowing in my brain. I can write some words and then I'm going to read because that is going to help me write this book. And then I get a couple ideas and I jot down the ideas, and then they're in this like this mess of a document with just all these ideas and phrases. And that's okay, right? But I recognize that is part of the thing. Just like if you are getting back into shape or you're getting into shape for the first time, it's too daunting sometimes to be like, I need to carve out this much time and you didn't sleep well. Okay, do something. Stretch, work mobility, go on a walk. You have to recognize that those little rocks are helping in the big goal, whatever the thing is, right? And so I think that is a very helpful example that we can use as a metaphor, but it might be a literal translation to what someone is working on right now, to say that, like, yeah, it is the little tiny pieces that all contribute to this whole thing that you're trying to do. And it might be that project, but it might just be like you, right? We're all working on us. And that's kind of the point of this whole episode.
Yeah, we're meant to have things to struggle towards. Life will never be easy. You never get there. And I mean, that ties back into some of the stuff you guys said right at the beginning about happiness. Happiness comes from working towards things that bring you meaning and purpose, and ideally, hopefully, belonging, connection, those kind of things. It's not just the like hedonistic type pleasure. Like, I'm just sitting on a beach in Mexico once I retire for the rest of my life getting drunk every day. You probably end up miserable. Like, you
No.
probably won't have meaning, connection, or any of those things. And really, that's how I see. Like, I don't actually even ever want to retire. My dad's 77. He's almost 78. Still works as much as he ever has because he loves what he does. He gets to help people. And his version of helping people is saving them money on their taxes. Not what we would think of for most people, but
I
he
need that
loves it.
help. That person is a hero. Not all heroes wear capes. I need that person for sure.
Yeah. And you know what? And it brings him connection. He's friends with his clients. He's friends with his staff. No one ever leaves. All the staff's been around 10, 20, 30 years because he treats everybody super well. And that brings him connection. So back to your thing. First off, Eric, I'm proud of you for doing that. That's a big project, right?
It's
I mean,
scary.
like I say, it took me thousands of hours and not to write that much, but to distill down the ideas to what is worth your time. I could have written that book in a month if I just threw it all together and threw it at someone, but it wouldn't have nearly the value. And this goes back to the whole mission statements and purpose and our identity of who we are. Like, it took me countless hours to have a one-line mission statement that I can write out in 20 words. That was countless hours of reflection. And that's what, to me, the book is. It's not only your way of using your asymmetrical time to help others, it's actually your way of reflecting internally on yourself. It's distilling your own insights. It's like meditation. It's like sitting in with your own thoughts and then being able to clarify them, get them out on paper, and start refining them. And then ideally, what you often do is you share them with others. Like Seb, I know you talked about writing it with Sean. I mean, Sean's incredible. Like, couldn't pick a better person to write a book with there. And you guys combining your wisdom into a book, like, tell me once it's out. I would love to read that, much like I'd love to read yours, Eric. So, but back to this big project. For anybody out there who's thinking about it, whether it's applying for ERT, whether it's a promotion, whether it's writing a book, starting a podcast, any of these kind of things you want to do, it's action. You got to actually habitually start carving out the time. The time won't just show up. You know where the time showed up for me? I don't watch Netflix anymore. I don't really watch movies. A lot of things I used to do that were kind of like downtime where you turn your brain off, I stopped doing. And largely when I'd go off to my training weeks with my ERT team, I would sit in my hotel room and write from like 5 to 10 at night, every night for years, because it was time already away from my family that I could either choose to go get drunk with the boys or I can choose to put it into something productive. And my challenge to anybody out there listening, where do you want your time to go? We really only do get so much time here. And my hope was to take my hardship, my suffering, my pain, to bring some good out of it and to use it in a way to help other people. And that's my challenge for anyone listening. How do you want to, like, if you could take one thing away from this podcast, what would you apply? What have you heard today? What could you apply in your life to make your life just that little bit better? Whether it's helping people, whether it's, what's that thing you believe that you can do? Because I'll tell you what, if you believe you can do it, you probably can. And I mean, not to go on a giant tangent, but as far as like trying to do different things, when I was like in my early 20s, I hadn't even played hockey the year before, and I literally took my gear, showed up to a European Pro League, and made a team just by believing like I could do this. I took 2 months to train, showed up. The first team wouldn't even call me back. They're like, who's your agent? I'm like, I don't have an agent. I'm just here. And I literally caught on with the second team, played the full season. So I just say that my hope is that maybe it gives someone a little bit of inspiration. Whatever big dream you have that you say, I don't know if I could do that. I'm telling you, you can. But now, what are those little habits? How do you break that down into the small goals so that you can start working towards what brings you meaning? And you'll look back and be like, wow, I'm so happy I did that. I'm so happy I spent my time that way. But what is that for you?
One of the things I'd like to add to this, just to this entire conversation and just to the podcast as a whole, is that if you've been listening to 150 episodes, but there hasn't been a period of integration and efforts made into integrating some of these things through, you're basically entertaining yourself. And there is nothing wrong with entertaining yourself. But since you've already spent the time doing it, doing the work of listening and having these conversations and through dialectics, really develop ideas that can be beneficial for your own life, why not spend some time integrating them? Right. And so just imagine if you took one actionable item for any of the podcasts that Eric has pushed out that you've listened to. That is one item. That is 150 items that you could potentially have integrated within the confines of who you are as a person and what your mindset is like. That would be extremely beneficial. Now, if you look at it and you go, okay, this is a very convoluted conversation. We go in all kinds of different ways. There's a million different things. Well, yeah, that is where replay and listen to it again and grab something else and really implement and field test it, pressure test it against your reality, see if it works for you, or maybe it doesn't, or maybe there's something that needs to be fixed. But the only way to do that is to invest. And in order to invest time, you need to remove times from the things that do not help with your outcome, with your desired outcome or your goal that you set forth for yourself, as Mark alluded to. And so one more thing that Mark said that was a very powerful and I think requires a little bit of attention is sitting with your own thoughts. You know, a lot of people, and this goes with the identity piece and all of the things that we have discussed so far, a lot of people will refuse to sit with their own thoughts because there are things in there that need to be fixed. There's healing that needs to happen. There's things that need to be addressed. There is shame and guilt and a variety of other emotions that might be involved in this that make an introspection very, very uncomfortable. Much less even doing something about anything that you find. But here's the issue. There really isn't a winning at that game. You are not going to win that. You can compartmentalize all day, all week, all year for the next decade, but eventually those doors will open. And when they do, the stuff that comes out will be 10 times stronger than it was when you initially put it away. So there is really no getting rid of that. And so it's never going to be perfect. But the fact is, how many people we know keep themselves as busy as possible so they don't have to sit with their thoughts? Mm-hmm. You know, and the reason why that is,
to say we all have, the three of us have, right?
100%. Everybody has. And I think it's, you know, once you learn the life lesson that, hey, the longer I sit with this, the more it stews, the more it awakens some things within me that are interfering with the vision I have for myself, or the version of me that could be optimized. And so when Mark speaks about sitting with your thoughts, for him, his process, sort of very therapeutically speaking, was writing his book. And so not only was the goal righteous in that it was going to help the collective, and that is, you know, something to be commended for, but also it had self-help written all over, you know, because he really invested and engaged in doing the work that he needed to do so that he could push the product that he needed to push to help everybody else and himself at the same time. And so those dual modality or those dual purposes are excellent. And not everything is just, okay, if I'm doing this, it has this effect. No, it has a reverberating effects. It has reverberating effects on a variety of different things, on all of those subsystems. So again, an oversimplification. Writing a book only serves the purpose of helping people out if this is what the intent is originally. Not the case. It's going to help you as well, you know? So just a bit of clarity on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The writing piece, it's equal parts, right? It's that double-edged sword where it can be cathartic, it can feel good, and then it also is just like a lot of, you're drudging things up, but also you're second guessing yourself. You're writing the sentence, you're like, well, that sounds stupid. Like, look at my stupid words on the piece of paper. But it all is part of the work, right? And so I'm highly an advocate for some form of journaling and writing down some thoughts for everybody. And I wasn't always that way. Shout out to Joey, who's been on the show a couple times, for nudging me pretty hard in that direction, to even sending me a pen to help me do it. So, shout out Joey. And then, yeah, going back to Seb, man, like your book that you're working on with Sean, I remember it was quite a while back that you guys posted, and it was a photo. I think you guys were sitting over like a coffee table or something, going like, hey, we're starting this project. And I was like, whatever that is. And I kind of thought maybe a book. I was like, that's going to be dope. And I'm going to be looking out for that. And so, yeah, we've covered so much ground. I really appreciate you both. As always, kind of like saying, I think as you were saying, Seb, like, to listen through content, whether it's this show or someone else's, like, what are you getting from it? What is it pulling upon? If you had to challenge yourself, what I've been listening to content like this for so long. What are the things that are nagging at me that I haven't really initiated? Or like, what are three things that I start now, like literally right now? Because it could be writing down 3 gratitudes before you leave your room. It could be, I'm going to go on a walk before I start my shift today. Like, I'm committed, right? Whatever the thing is, what are those things? And if there are these things that have been nagging at you, like, stop waiting. Let's move into action. And this, I love how we've kind of meandered and carved through some different trails, in the prospect of exploring, like, how do we show up better, to interact with those around us, to build our reputation, our abilities, our optimization. And it's all intertwined. So again, even to nod to listening to content and getting some lessons from it, like, I knew the part of recording this is like, it's for me too. Like, I am a consumer of it. So to go back to our episodes and others, so many guests, and be able to revisit some of these lessons that people are actively teaching me. And so I appreciate that kind of that nod to listen back, because there's a lot of gems. And even as both of you said it, where I'm like, we're all scribbling notes because we want to contribute and peel things back. But it's also like, yeah, I got to marinate on a lot of this, and the brain has been appropriately melted a little bit. So, but yeah, if you guys want to just please share out what you're working on again, or like where people can find your bookmark, and then what people should be expecting, and how to follow and get in contact with you, and anything you'd like to close with. So, who'd like to kick it off, Mark?
Sure, I'll go first. Yeah, thanks. It's been a real honor, Eric, Seb, as always. So thank you for having me on. If people want to find me, I got a website. It's my name, Mark Bouchard, MarkBouchard.ca, because we're up here in Canada. I post a little bit on social media. I'd say LinkedIn's probably my primary one. You can reach me on there or reach me through my website. And I've actually just started a YouTube channel. I haven't actually put it out publicly, so you guys are some of the first to hear about it, but it's called Police Mentors. And really, it's kind of inspired by someone like yourself, Eric, and what I've watched you do over this time frame. I have these amazing connections of people like you and a lot of friends doing this at the highest level. They're not guys out there, going on podcasts and stuff, but I just wanted to share some of that wisdom. So I'm making little videos because I realize a lot of people may not want to read a book. So how can we meet people where they are is kind of my plan. Make short little videos and then do a little bit of longer form kind of podcasts like this that'll have a bit of interview style, but also a bit of this like group discussion, get a few people collaborating on topics. So if that interests you, hop over to YouTube and Police Mentors. You'll find some more and more content going up there.
Love it. Thank you, Mark. Seb.
And if you are one of the persons that says, I don't read books, read a book. That's part of challenging the status quo here. Yeah. So for me right now, full focus is on the book, and I'm doing this full time essentially right now. I do have my company Raven Strategic for a variety of different things. I do leadership training, guest speaking appearances, public speaking, courses and security courses. And I do work overseas. I have a degree in international security, so I can do mostly at a strategic level now. I'm less interested in the running and gunning type stuff. This is for the guys working for me, essentially. So my website is Raven Strategic with a K, strategic spelled with a K, and .com. And so that's my website. My Instagram is probably the place where you'll find me the most, which is 15 minutes a day. Now I've reduced the amount of time spent on there because I have to optimize my time. So I'm sure Eric, you'll link the my handle and whatnot. And I do my very best to answer DMs. So if there are certain things that you would like to touch on or send me something, by all means, go ahead. Just be a little bit patient. I'm spending a limited amount of time on there daily because there's priorities that need to be dealt with. But I will get to you eventually. And it'll be my pleasure. It was great once again to do this with you guys. Always awesome to cross swords with the two of you.
Appreciate you, gents. And yes, I think that's a very healthy nod to end with. Is like toggle that device time, that social media time, and or spend it with the folks that make you better, not the toxic stuff out there.